Здравствуйте. Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce Karen Evans-Romaine, Department Chair, Professor of Slavic Languages and Literature at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And she is also Russian Flagship Center Director. And in her role as director, she's head of one of 27 language flagship programs nationally, of which only 4 Russian. These flagship programs, as we all know now, are extraordinarily important. They incorporate a national initiative to change the way Americans learn languages through a groundbreaking, innovative approach to language education for students from kindergarten through college. It has been called the most prominent recent development in language teaching in Slavic. Somehow Karen also has time, I don't know where she finds it, to serve as a very active researcher and writer. Her research interests include Boris Pasternak, intertextuality in Russian modernism, the interrelationship of music and literature, German-Russian literary relations, European modernism and romanticism, and of course, foreign language pedagogy. She is the author of numerous books and high-level research articles in all of these areas. And I would like you to introduce this one that we all know, and not only our department. This is the textbook, and Karen is a co-author of this textbook that has a now 5th edition, survived, and used pretty actively with probably most departments that teach Russian uses this book. I have to say that above all, Karen is an inspiring teacher who is much beloved by her students. I was lucky enough actually to have a few of her students when I taught at Middlebury Summer School, and one wrote the next. She's a really enthusiastic and energetic teacher. She always found ways to capture my attention, and said, even in the morning class. She offers a lot of help and is always willing to give more. She always has a smile on her face, and that makes it more enjoyable to be in class. Speaking for myself, I've had the opportunity to get to know Karen a little bit during this visit, and she has also been an inspiration to me, as I'm sure she will be to all of us. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Karen Evans-Romaine.
Thank you so much for that kind and warm introduction. It's a real pleasure and a tremendous honor to be here. I've told people over and over again that I grew up not too far from here. I grew up in the DC area in Maryland, and we used to come to UVA just to enjoy what a beautiful place it is, just as tourists. So having grown up seeing this campus many times as a child, and Monticello many times, it's a real pleasure for me to be here for work. So thank you so much for this invitation. It's a real honor and pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. So the UW-Madison Russian flagship, the idea of the flagship is teaching future global professionals. So that is a quote from the language flagship site. And more important for us, as always, for us as teachers, learning from our students. So I hope to be talking a little bit about both. It's, of course, always a two-way street. So Lilia quoted from the National Language Flagship's mission statement, how they define themselves as a program, and I'm going to continue what Lilia was quoting. So I will be incorporating to a great deal today a presentation given by Dr. Sam Eisen, who is the director of all of the language flagships for the National Security Education Program. And so he is cited on my slides, but unfortunately in the note functions you can't see that. So consider the quotations there very, very frequently. I'll be borrowing a great deal from his presentation, especially in talking on the national level about flagship. So, from their website, the flagship's website, the National Language Flagship is a national initiative funded by the Department of Defense to change the way Americans learn languages, as Lilia said, from kindergarten through college. Language Flagship graduates will take their place among the next generation of global professionals. So we'll talk about what we consider that is. What's a global professional? Commanding a superior level of proficiency in one of 10 languages considered critical to U.S. national security and economic competitiveness. So the funding is from the Department of Defense, and the office within the Department of Defense that governs Flagship is the same office that governs Project Go, which I know is present here at UVA. It's also the same office that governs the Defense Language Institute. And so and the wonderful, wonderful Boren Fellowships and Scholarships. So we all work very closely together. UW-Madison also has Project Go students. As part of the National Flagship meetings, we have visited the DLI. I had visited the DLI previously for other reasons, having to do with their testing program. And the language, and DLI often comes to the flagship meetings. So we work closely together, although we ourselves do not implement the DLPT, their testing system, in any of our testing. But we try to coordinate our activities in an efficient way. So these are some of their initiatives, some of which I know a good deal about, some of which I know virtually nothing about. So I'm afraid I can't answer good questions on all of these points, but I wanted to show that all of these points are there. It's a very, very large thing. Language Flagship graduates, again, this is from the national site and from Sam Eisen's presentation. So certified professionals are highly motivated graduates from undergraduate programs. That's something I want to emphasize, that in its previous iteration, the flagship had originally been designed for graduate students because the belief was that undergraduate students could not achieve a superior level of proficiency. Now, giving a talk on ACTFL levels is a different talk altogether. But I'll take a quick aside to say that to some extent, if we think about our own undergraduates coming to us as freshmen, coming to us as 18-year-olds, most of their discourse in English, in their native language, is at the advanced level. And part of our task in college is to help our students communicate at the superior level in speaking and writing, and to be able to read superior level, if not distinguished level texts. So the flagship has a huge task to try to help us do in a foreign language what we're also trying to help our students do in their native language. So the previous belief had been, oh, undergraduates can't do this. They're dealing with superior level functions in their own language. They're developing superior level writing in their own language. How do we do this? So it's now been an undergraduate program for several years now, only undergraduate. So they have professional level language proficiency in their flagship language of choice among those 10. They have advanced cultural skills and experience coming from living and working abroad, but not exclusively from their experience abroad. And of course, they have intercultural insights for careers in federal government, global business, non-governmental organizations, and many other fields. So that is the conception of how they define a global professional. So as Lilia said, there are 27 programs now at 23 universities. So clearly, as you can see, some universities have more than one program. The languages you can see: Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, and Urdu, Korean, Persian, Portuguese, Russian, Swahili, and Turkish. At the time of Sam's presentation in February of this year, he gave a presentation at the DLI, from which this is very heavily borrowed. There were 900 language flagship students at that time, so I can't give you the figure today because I don't have it yet. In addition to that, there are approximately 1,100 students taking flagship courses at their home universities. So some universities separate out flagship courses and tracks, some do not. At Michigan, Michigan, good heavens, at Wisconsin later, I'm a Michigan graduate, suddenly that came out. Oberlin, as is Professor Clues, and Michigan. So at Wisconsin, where I teach, we do not have separated flagship courses. Everybody's together, and that's been a principle behind our program. But as you see, if we add all of those students up together, that means there are 2,000 students taking flagship courses in one iteration or another, in one sense or another, throughout the country. So I'm not going to read you this list, of course. It's a big list. It's up on the website, thelanguageflagship.org. And you can see, as Lilia pointed out, that there are only 4 institutions in Russian. We are the youngest of them. Our flagship has existed since 2010. And you can see, of course, that the biggest is Chinese, as one might expect. Arabic is next. And at this time right now, there's a request for proposals out to open a new Arabic flagship program. Last year there was an RFP out for Chinese, and they added 2 new programs, one in Hawaii and one in Minnesota. And so some are much smaller. So there's just 1 each in some other languages. The components of a language flagship program generally, so here I'm not talking specifically about Wisconsin, but about flagship programs in general, are coordinated domestic interventions that go beyond the language classroom, including group and individual tutoring, guided co-curricular and extracurricular activities. There's sort of a blurry line between what those two mean. Content-based instruction, which is also a very broad term to cover many things. Semi-autonomous learner tools, which can be very broad, broadly defined, that is. Rigorous assessment tied to anticipated learner outcomes. I'll talk about that in some detail later in this presentation. And a common program goal of ACTFL Superior or ILR 3 proficiency and flagship certification. I'll stop for a minute and define those 2 things. So, the ILR stands for the Interagency Language Roundtable. And I must now correct myself and say that Sam gave his talk at an ILR meeting, not at a DLI meeting. DLI was present. So that was the originator of what we now have as the ACTFL scale. So the scale that is defined for academia is the ACTFL scale, the scale put together by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. The original idea for this scale came from the government, from the ILR, as a way of measuring language functionality in various skills. And that scale exists to this day. It was simply adapted for academic purposes. And the scale in ACTFL, for the purposes of flagship, misses the top rung, which is native speech, native-like speech and functionality. It goes up to distinguished, so you'll see I'll be showing those levels. At the moment, ACTFL testing only goes through superior. They're now piloting distinguished level testing for ACTFL. But you'll see that distinguished will play a role in ACTFL. I'm very happy to answer questions about these scales at great length if you want to know later. Or I can just refer you to a website. So ILR is the government scale. So that is how flagship students are measured at the end. Domestic flagship components include intensive and articulated language instruction, guided interventions designed to ensure exposure and encourage practice in the target language, weekly group and individual tutoring, integrated content-based instruction and courses. You'll see that those are separate and it varies from institution to institution, across disciplines, immersive learning environments such as language houses, and cultural functions and events that enable students to use and improve their language in a variety of settings on and off campus. Overseas program admissions. So the flagship, we always have to make clear at our information sessions that admission to the domestic flagship program does not guarantee admission to the overseas flagship program. They're 2 separate processes, both very rigorous, and the second, as you imagine, is more rigorous. So all domestic flagship students are trained to meet the standards for participation in a flagship overseas center experience. Non-flagship students may also apply to the overseas program. They're called at-large students when they're not affiliated with a domestic flagship program. The only difference really is that they don't have access to the fellowship opportunities, the scholarship opportunities available to domestic flagship students. But any UVA student can apply to a flagship overseas program. And I can certainly speak for the Russian Academic Council in saying that every year we admit students to the overseas program who are not only from the domestic institutions, the domestic flagship institutions. So, in order to get in to the study abroad, all applicants must take the flagship battery of assessments, and they must meet the minimum proficiency of ILR 2 or ACTFL Advanced in 2 modalities, and the third needs to be at least intermediate high or ILR 1+. One of those modalities has to be speaking. So in order to get into the overseas program, you have to already speak at advanced low on the ACTFL scale or ILR 2. And the other 2 modalities are reading and listening. One of those at least has to be, the best application is 2 in all. but it has to be at least 2 in one of those modalities, either reading or listening, and 1+ or intermediate high in the other. Student applications are reviewed by language-specific academic councils that ensure their preparedness for the program. So all four directors of the 4 Russian flagship centers read all of the applications, as does Sam Eisen, representing flagship, as do IIE representatives, and as does the director of the flagship overseas program. And we all meet together at American councils in late February to discuss the applications and make admissions decisions. Overseas flagship program components include, they are always housed at peer universities. I'll get to the Russian one in a minute. It's a complicated story. Intensive directed language training in small groups, so there has to be small group instruction. Direct enrollment courses, that's a term that's flagship specific. Basically, it means that you take a course with native speaking students in the native speaking environment that's designed not for foreigners but for native speakers. So you go and take a Russian history course with Russian students, for example, at the university. Integrated homestays, meaningful professional internships and work experiences. So for the Russian program, that takes place in the spring semester. The direct enrollment course takes place in the fall semester. Integrated homestays to maximize language use, and an integrated cultural program. So homestays are required. It's a required component of the program. Regular weekly meetings with peer tutor and guided discussion groups with native speakers, and ongoing evaluations. Tests, site visits, teacher-tutor reports, portfolio development, self-evaluation. So you can see that assessment generally, that means assessment of students in the program and assessment of the program itself. So that's actually, those are part of the domestic components as well. We assess our students, and we as programs are regularly assessed as well. Including bi-weekly language utilization reports. These LURs, language utilization reports, are bi-weekly reports the students turn in to say how they use their foreign language. How many hours a week they spent doing this, doing this, doing this. So in class, doing their homework, reading for leisure, and talking with their host family, socializing with their peers, doing something else like going on an excursion or going to a concert, something like that. So they divide all of this out in the language utilization reports. And Dan Davidson has done some really interesting studies of how Russian language students are using these LURs and what these are indicating about their progress. So one of the great indicators of progress in Russian, and the coincidence does not necessarily indicate causality, but it's an interesting coincidence. I'm not going to call it a coincidence. An interesting development in these 2 areas simultaneously is that students who make the greatest progress spend the greatest amount of time reading in Russian for leisure. So it would make sense that if you read more for leisure, you make greater progress. So there we go. Overseas program sites, again, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I will begin to explain the complicated story with Russian. So at this very moment, I mean like in 5 minutes, the plane is supposed to take off to take the current group of Russian flagship students, not to St. Petersburg, but to Almaty, Kazakhstan. So our program originally has been affiliated with St. Petersburg University. We hope that that affiliation will continue in future. However, as of this past summer, the Department of Defense has announced a hiatus in any programming set in Russia. So no Boren scholarships can be used in Russia right now. The flagship students suddenly were told, very soon after we were told, in late summer, that they would be going not to St. Petersburg, but to Almaty, Kazakhstan. And if you noticed on CLANGs recently, those of you who read the International Slavic Listserv CLANGs, the American Council's Russian Language and Area Studies program, RLASP, you'll see that acronym on this PowerPoint a great deal. They have just announced that they are adding Almaty to their sites for the summer and academic year as well. So that our students right this minute will be taking off for first Frankfurt and then Almaty. So they'll be in Almaty this year. So we don't know how long that'll be the case because we don't know how our relations with Russia will be developing in the near future. So that is the current story. So this is, again, from Sam's presentation. You can see these are enrollments across languages nationally. So last fall, it was 895 students. And this is the same slide, just shown in a different way. So I'll show you the slide again. And in case it's easier just for you to read the numbers, there are the numbers. Flagship enrollment by language. So you can see that, as not surprisingly, Chinese is in the first place. Arabic is in the second place. And Russian is not that far behind in the third place. And that other languages then are significantly lower enrolled. And these are the same figures in numbers. So Russian flagships, several years ago, were at 82. I started with that year, partly because that was what's on Sam's slide, but also in part because that's the year that we joined the flagship. So we are part of those numbers. 82 in 2010-11, 118 in 11-12, 128 in 12-13, and slightly down the following year, 121. I don't have the current figures, so I will get those soon, in part because they can be a little bit fluid, as can all our class figures at the beginning of the academic year, so they're probably reluctant to issue current figures as of now. So that was a year ago, and so they're the top enrolled languages, I have told you. So the test, the results are astonishing. So you can see that in 2013, 93% of the flagship graduates across languages achieved 2+ and above, advanced high and above. I'll show you the Russian, they make you even happier. So the speaking gains, we can see of post-capstone students, 121. 58 of those achieved superior. 4 of those achieved, 4 began at superior, 58 finished at superior, and 38 finished at advanced high. Flagship exit results in Russian. So this is a small group. That was just for that 1 year. It was 16 people. So 15 entered at advanced, 1 at intermediate high. I don't know or remember the story of why that was the case. And predictably, 15 finished at superior and 1 at advanced high. So there was 1 beginning at intermediate high, 1 completing at advanced high. The others began at advanced and finished at superior. In listening, you can see that 2 began at intermediate high, 14 at advanced, 1 finished at advanced high, and 15 finished at superior. And in reading, similar to the speaking, all 15 began at advanced. 1 actually began at advanced high. And on exit, everyone hit superior, and 2 of them had reached distinguished. So these are really, really astonishing results. So these are the flagship Russian programs. I've told you about the places now, so I'll go through this fairly quickly, except just to say that, again, that we are the newest. So now I'll move to UW-Madison specifically. So we are a joint effort. So I think that's important to know for those of you considering becoming a flagship program, applying for flagship next time you see an RFP in your language. So we are a joint project of the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures and UW's Language Institute, which is also affiliated with the doctoral program in second language acquisition. So the Language Institute at UW is an institute that garners grants, that sponsors workshops, lectures, and that sponsors and organizes, puts together a TA orientation for all new TAs in all foreign languages. So there's a unified orientation program, 3-day orientation program in August when new TAs come in all foreign languages. Then each department has its own orientations, but that is across the board for everyone. And they also put together various programs, ways in which we as varying language and literature departments can get together and talk about language learning, language acquisition, pedagogy, and so forth. And so we and they work together in that project, and the grant actually goes through the Language Institute. So the money goes through the Language Institute and not through the Slavic department. We work intimately together, very, very closely together. We also work in very close consultation with our Center for Russia, East Europe, and Central Asia, our Title VI Center, KRIKA, which is a very large and very, really very rich center represented by many, many disciplines. Then we also work very, very closely with the Division of International Studies, under which is the Office of International Academic Programs, or IAP. That's our Study Abroad Office. So all of those components work very, very closely together. Our student alumni and alumni majors are quite varied. One very important aspect of the flagship program is that students do not have to major in that language. The whole idea of flagship is globalization, global professionals. So the whole idea is that the student be able to work in the target language in whatever major that student chooses. So most of our flagship students do become Russian majors, either as a single or as a double major, but they don't have to. This second major in our second track, Russian Language and Civilization, very closely overlaps with the Russian flagship curriculum. So it's very easy for the student to pick up a second major in Russian, no matter what their first major, as long as they're in the College of Letters and Science. It may become more complicated if they're from another college, depending on what the distribution requirements of that college are. But as you see, flagship students come in a pretty broad variety of majors and pretty well distributed. So you see the Russian majors are 2 tracks, Russian Language and Literature and Russian Language and Civilization. Then in the social sciences, history, poli-sci, international studies, psychology, and cultural anthropology. It's something of a mystery to me why we haven't had a sociology major yet, because we do have a sociologist on our faculty who is a specialist in Russian. I hope that will happen in the future. Business-related majors, economics, which is in the College of Letters and Science, so it's my labeling it business-related is something somewhat arbitrary, and finance, which is of course in the College of Business. Humanities, linguistics, English, German, Spanish, comp lit, and classics. There's no reason it couldn't be a French major or an Italian major either. That's just how it's worked out. And in STEM, we've had majors in biochemistry, neurobiology, microbiology, and immunology, mathematics, and nuclear engineering. So there's been a wide variety of STEM fields as well. This is a national slide. This is again from Sam Eisen's PowerPoint, but I just want to give you an indication of the large number of flagship students across languages across the board who are double majors. So you'll see that 55% are 1 major only, but 40% have 2 majors. And forgive me, I did not do the statistics coming into today's presentation, but it's a far higher percentage for us. The vast majority of students in the flagship program are not only Russian majors. They tend to have 2 majors. So there you can see again nationally across languages the distribution of areas in which these majors, from which these majors come. So the green you see humanities. The blue at the bottom is social sciences. You see business and professional. So the business is roughly at 10. Professional looks like it is roughly at close to 10 as well. And STEM is 12.9, which is really quite significant. And then smaller percentages in education, and presumably that tiny, tiny percentage without a major. So our enrollment numbers have been fairly steady at 40 in the flagship program. Right now it's just under, but that is absolutely to the minute, because a few students began this academic year deciding that the Russian flagship wasn't for them. That's something important to keep in mind with the flagship as well. We have a few students who decide to leave the program every year out of roughly 40 students. So we've had as high as in the upper 40s. No, I'm sorry, high as the mid 40s, excuse me. And it is a deeply conscious, very carefully considered decision a student has to make. Sometimes a student enters the program and decides that it's taking up too much of their time, or it's not closely enough aligned with their interests, or sometimes for financial reasons they leave, because we'll talk about study abroad and fellowships. The flagship fellowship funding does not cover any of the study abroad programs in toto. So sometimes students decide that it's just too expensive for them, or if they decide they would need to stay on for another year, a fifth year instead of a fourth, that might be too much for them too. So that's very frequently a factor, but sometimes it's a purely academic decision. Or in one case I recall very clearly, a student got a Fulbright and decided to graduate. You can't argue with that. So the student went to Russia for a year on a Fulbright. So people leave for various reasons. So that partly explains why our number this year is slightly lower than last year. But it seems to be relatively stable around 40 at this point. We hope to make it higher still. Just to give you a comparison, we have at any given time, in any given year, roughly 50 Russian majors. That is over the 4 years. So it's fairly evenly distributed, and that's been fairly stable. So you can see that our overseas numbers have gone way up. So on that plane, which I hope just took off, we have 12 students. So. And last year we had 5, and one who just stayed for the fall semester and decided that St. Petersburg was not a good match and came home after 1 semester. So our domestic components, all of this is on our website. So I invite you at any point after this talk to take a look at our website, which is just russianflagship.wisc.edu. The whole curriculum's up there, as well as profiles of our students, profiles of our alumni, a discussion of our tutoring program, our events calendar. It's all there. So I invite you to take a look at that. I got the majors list right from our website. So the advanced curriculum, basically what happens is that they start by completing all 4 years in our regular Russian language curriculum. That's the starting point. Then they take our flagship courses, which include a 2-semester sequence of the history of Russian culture and contemporary Russian culture, of course taught in Russian. So this is taught by someone who had previously, and still continues, to teach a year-long sequence in Russian culture in English. But the Russian course is by no means a translation of the English course. So she teaches 2 distinct courses, one for a broader audience in English, which is part of the requirements for our Russian language and civilization major, and one specifically flagship focused, but open to anyone. Our graduate students sometimes take it. Undergraduates from any fields, if their Russian is good enough, they can take it as well. And in addition to that, they take one more course. That's the second bullet point. They can choose between a course that so far I have mostly been teaching in advanced listening and conversation that is mostly news and media based. They can take a senior capstone seminar, which our department faculty and academic staff pass around. And may or may not have a literature focus. So I taught it 2 years ago based on Bulgakov's novel Mastir Margarita. We read the novel in full in Russian. Last year, the flagship assistant director and the director of our Russian language program, Dr. Anna Tumarkin, taught a course on Russian political satire, which had elements of literature, elements of television programs such as Kukli, and various other sites, various other media. So it's a fascinating course. And right now, Professor David Bethay is teaching a course on Pushkin's Yevgeny Onegin. So it's a tremendously important key novel in verse in Russian. It forms one could call it the key central work of Russian literature. So we teach the course in Russian, and it's not just for flagship students. Or something that we call a flagship research seminar, but that is sort of a temporary placeholder of a title. We're undergoing undergraduate curricular reform, we hope, during the course of this year. So at the moment, there is no separate course called the flagship research seminar, which is why I put independent study in parentheses. In essence, what that has been is independent studies in which students pursue a research project of their choice, meet with me individually. In addition to that, we meet as a group weekly to discuss with each other their research in progress. So it's been a fascinating project to work on. It's been an overload for me, but well worth it because I'm watching students develop their own research projects in Russian and present to each other these research projects in progress. Of course, all of this in Russian. Then in addition to the curriculum, there is tutoring. So there's small group tutoring at all levels. Those small groups are usually 2 to 4 students. Then there is individualized tutoring starting with the 3rd year. And there's something called a Russian Across the Curriculum tutorial, which is the only tutoring that's done for credit. In that case, a student does a weekly tutorial with the graduate student in a specific discipline area. So last year we had to find someone in physics. We've had to find someone in biochemistry. Very frequently it's in politics or economics. So that's something that is specific to a major research university. That's something UCLA can do. It's something we can do because we have native speakers of Russian in all of these disciplines who are, our first choice is to get graduate students so that we can help at least with hourly support for a graduate student. They're of course paid to do this. Or if not, potentially a member of the academic staff and sometimes a member of the community who's an expert in that area. So they do this weekly tutorial and then they turn in a final paper to me in Russian, 5 pages. I cannot assess the content, especially if it's biochemistry or physics, but I can assess the Russian. Then there's assessment that I'll talk about more in a later slide. Social hour and cultural activities that we'll talk about a little bit, and Russian language in the international learning community, Ruski Dom. I'll get to that in a minute too. So we'll break down these components in a second. Admissions is relatively competitive, but I wouldn't say wildly competitive. We look very carefully at various aspects of the student's work. So there are 2 admissions deadlines, 15 November and 15 March. On the 15th of October, we'll have an information session, and we'll continue to send out information classes about this. There's an application form where we look most seriously at their statement of purpose, why they're interested in the flagship program, what role it has in their future. They write that in English. Then we look at their foreign language background. We also require 2 letters of recommendation. If they're currently taking Russian, which is our preference, one of those letters has to be from a current or recent Russian instructor. If they're a high school student, part of the mandate is that we bring students in from the very beginning. So sometimes we get applications from high school students, and it's very rare to have Russian programs in high schools, especially in Michigan, especially in Wisconsin and Minnesota. There are some schools in Minnesota that offer Russian. To our knowledge, there is not currently a single high school in Wisconsin that offers Russian. Very, very sad. So in Illinois, there are more. So we more frequently might get out-of-state applications from Minnesota, from Illinois, or from other states altogether where the student might come from high school. So in that case, we can look at Russian. If not, we're looking at Wisconsin students who have really great records in French or in Spanish or in German. That's usually the case. So we want to see a 3.0 GPA overall, 3.5 in Russian if they're taking it now. And then once they're admitted, of course, if they're high school students, they also have to be admitted to UW-Madison, which we have no pull in. We can't affect that. They sign a document with these points. So they sign that they will work very hard to meet proficiency benchmarks and complete course requirements as specified in our admissions letter. We have an individualized study plan that's laid out for every student. They have to consult with an advisor each semester before registering for courses. They have to enroll in at least 3 credits of Russian, usually 1 course each semester. They have to maintain a Russian GPA of 3.5, a cumulative 3.0. They have to participate in 1 to 3 hours of tutoring, of which only the Russian language across the curriculum tutorial is for credit. All the other tutoring is not for credit. And follow the tutoring guidelines. They have to participate actively in weekly flagship social hour and other programming for Russian flagship students. So in point of fact, we require 10 Russian cultural activities, which mostly will include the social hour per semester. So it's a 15-week semester. 10 of those 15 weeks, they have to have done something in our cultural program and participate in assessments, which I'll talk about. So tutoring. As I've said, the tutors, our preference is to hire graduate students because we can pay them and help support them hourly. Sometimes it's academic staff, lecturers. Sometimes it's members of the community who are native speakers. So as I've said, it's non-credit except for the Russian across the curriculum tutorial. So that is the only case in which they have to turn in a written product from their tutoring. And so that RAC tutorial is either linked to a concurrent course, linked to a past course. Sometimes they might be an economics major. They're ready to do this RAC tutorial, say, only in their 4th year, but there might not be a concurrent course in their economics curriculum at that specific time that would be a good match for a tutorial. So they might link it to a past course, or we can just build something around the student's area of interest. So the tutoring is generally considered by students to be the most rewarding part of the program. And that is Sad news for non-flagship programs, because that is, we pay our tutors, that is a paid portion of the program, and something we love to be able to provide for students. So this comment is pretty typical. Annually, we ask our students to turn in general evaluations of the program every year, and this is typical for those evaluations. This is from our website, so the students gave us permission to put this on the website. So all the wonderful things you'd expect to get from tutoring, personalized attention, and so forth. Social hour. So it's run and led by a native Russian-speaking graduate student in the second language acquisition doctoral program. She has a TA status, so it's a TA appointment. It's a weekly separate social hour. We have one for advanced level students this year. We split it differently every year. This year it happens to be fourth year and up, and lower level students, second and third year. There are guest speakers who sometimes come from Russian-speaking community or guests to the UW-Madison. Very common it would be that they would give a lecture in Krika's weekly English language lecture series, which is open to the community. And then in addition to that, we would ask them to have a conversation with our students in Russian. Or it might be someone in the community whom we might ask to give a lecture in Russian. Or it could be another visitor. So we're constantly on the lookout for people who can be either having just a casual conversation where they just say a few words about themselves and then open up the floor for questions, or they would give a mini lecture in Russian. Both happen. Also, we have a weekly tea and conversation for all levels, so they would get social hour credit for any of these events, and cultural events in the community. So concerts, theater performance, so for example, pianist Olga Kern is coming, so that would count if we talk about something in Russian for that. So there's an example. Historian Boris Kolonitsky from European University in St. Petersburg came, gave a talk at Krika, and we snapped him up and asked him if he could please sit down and have a conversation. So around the room here are faculty members. Next to me is a historian, David McDonald, in our history faculty. I think on the other side is Irina Shevelenko from our department. We see the back of a graduate student and in Slavic, and then there are undergraduate flagship students as well. So we always open these up to anyone who can speak Russian and is interested in having the conversation within the university community. We tend not to open up the conversations to community members so that our flagship students don't feel too overwhelmed by Russian language questions. We want to be sure that our undergraduates have the chance to speak in Russian, but sometimes we do open up these conversations to members of the community. It really depends on the topic, the speaker, and so forth. Russian language floor, Ruski Dom, is part of our international learning community. We were able to open this up only with the flagship grant because the flagship grant pays for the housing and a meal stipend for the graduate language program coordinator who lives in the dorm. I'll show you her picture in a minute. So we are one of a number of language floors. French is in a separate house, but the others are in this ILC dorm. It's a beautiful old dorm on the lakeside. Madison is between two lakes. The campus is located on one of them. The faculty, in that case it is me, but it doesn't have to be, teaches a biweekly course and attends biweekly ILC dinners where there's a faculty speaker and then students just chat, either in English or Russian, depending on, on Tuesday night we just switch back and forth between the two. And then there are social activities separate from flagship activities. Usually about once a semester we have something joint. So you'll see a picture of one. So our our GLPC, Madina from Uzbekistan, we've been very lucky to have her as the GLPC now for our third year, which is really lucky. These are some Ruski Dom residents and one guest among them. They, as you could see, are making dumplings. They're making pelmeni. So we have a pelmeni gathering last winter, just before New Year's. The end of our semester. We watched the New Year's film, Ironia Судьбы, and we made pelmeni and just sort of chatted in the kitchen. We usually have something in the spring as well. Assessment is very rigorous, but that was something that we had in place before we got the flagship grant. So we've only made it even bigger, even more robust. So we do internal advisory OPIs of all of our flagship students every September. And so as you can see, we currently have 2 faculty and staff, including me and Anna Tumarkina, and 4 graduate students who are official ACTFL OPI testers. But these are internal advisory OPIs. They also take assessments that we had drawn up before the flagship was in place. That is a computerized assessment in grammar and syntax, an ACTFL ACTFL measured, calibrated, I should say, reading and listening exams that are computerized as well. So they do that battery in the fall, in August or September when they get back to campus. In April or May, American Councils has all flagship students across the board in Russian do their computerized assessments in reading and listening. So, and then, of course, American Councils does pre and post testing also for their RLASP program. So these are all low stakes and give us a sense of where students are, and we meet with students as advisors and tell them where they are and where they should be and what they need to do to get to where they should be. The high stakes is, of course, the admission for the overseas. So the targets are ambitious. So studies have shown that a Russian major in standard Russian program across the nation traditionally has achieved intermediate mid. So you get to intermediate mid in your second year, you stay there in your third year, you stay there in your fourth year, usually simply because of the low number of contact hours for upper level classes. And so our task was to get students to these levels by the time they apply. So by the end of third year Russian, we want them to be reading and listening at ILR 1+, ACTFL Intermediate High, and speaking and writing at Intermediate Mid. Fourth year, to be reading and listening at Advanced and speaking and writing at Intermediate High. And by the end of the Advanced curriculum, when they apply for the study abroad, at Advanced Mid in reading and listening and Advanced Low in speaking and writing. They're supposed to graduate after the study abroad year at Superior or ACTFL ILR 3 in all levels. The timeline, how do you get a student graduated with this? So we try to get them through the fourth year curriculum in 2 years with summer study. So second year Russian after their first year, study abroad serving as the equivalent of fourth year Russian after their second year. Then third year they do the advanced curriculum, and then fourth year they do the capstone. That doesn't always work. Sometimes they stay for 5 years. That tends to be more typical. And they can enter at various points. So if they can come in after 3 years of Russian, they have a leg up. Study abroad is required. For the Russian program, they're also required to have completed 6 weeks prior. It used to be strictly in Russia. We'll have to discuss that at our next Russian Academic Council meeting in November at ACTFL to make equivalents from other countries for obvious reasons. And flagship scholarships are available only for the flagship overseas program and for RLASP. As I've said, the flagship scholarships do not cover the total of those programs. So students have to be looking for other sources of financial aid outside that. Capstone components I've talked about. This is Russian specific, but it's about the same. The only specific things I want to point out is that the OPI is given in the ACTFL protocol, but now measured on the ILR scale. So that's a recent development. Oh, and in Russia also they take the TOEFL, the Russian equivalent of TOEFL, the exams that foreign students in Russia take as to be admitted to a Russian university in addition to admissions requirements. So they take level 2 in September. Level 3, which is what's required for university admission, in December. And then in the spring, they either retake level 3 or if they're ambitious, they try to take level 4. So this is really, really rigorous. So these are some flagship students. Our first group from 2011. All of them are working now using their Russian. 2 in Washington and 1 in Russia. These are 2 of our students in Ufa in 2003. They are now on that plane. So study abroad preparation. We work very hard to have Skype conversations, workshops. We bring American Councils in. We work very closely with IAP, our study abroad office, so we try to prepare students for study abroad by bringing all these people together in person or by Skype. Now that we have some study abroad returnees, we're trying to integrate them as well into social hour, giving presentations, being part of the orientation, and we try to bring people back to campus as well, as part of panels, as part of workshops, and so forth. We also try to give workshops, always do on ACTFL proficiency levels, but we want to try more and more in other areas to get them ready for study abroad and whatever else might interest them. So what have we learned? That students can reach superior, that undergraduates are willing to do this, to commit to get there, even if Russian's not their major, that this raises the level for all the classes. All our classes are mixed, So we are able to get better results from all students, whether or not they're in the flagship. That's been a very exciting development. As I've said, tutoring is the most highly valued component, and that alumni contact is really vital for students, for us, for the alumni, for everyone. We all benefit from that. We've learned that social hour is good if we mix activities. So some students like more of one thing, some more of another. So we've learned that we have to mix out activities and that nothing will make everyone happy. So we try to have some news, some films, some casual conversations, some card games, some mafia or durak, some various things. So a mix of things to make various students happy and comfortable. Students want opportunities to speak. And so we've been trying to provide them with those opportunities. UCLA has a wonderful annual undergraduate conference that anyone can apply to. I highly recommend it. If you can find the funding to get students out there, we can dig up the funding to send one. Last year we actually managed two. Flagship has a national conference at the University of Maryland. But even without that, we're trying more and more to give students a chance to present their research, to talk about their trips, to just present in various forums. And they also give informal presentations on campus and at high schools. We've learned that it's very important to foster student autonomy, that they have to take the lead in tutoring, that they have to work on learning outside the classroom, that we have to give them the tools to understand these targets, to understand what these ACTFL levels are and what they mean. And we need to try to, our goal is to provide them with as much information as we possibly can, but to let them take the lead in following up. So we give them information about career panels, about government recruiters coming, about scholarship opportunities, but we want them to take the lead in doing, in having agency, in having buy-in, if you wish, to make sure that they are the leaders. They're the masters of their own destiny. Benefits to graduate students are obvious. So the native speakers and those who are already at advanced mid or higher can be tutors. Those who are not yet there can take the flagship courses to help them to get there. Graduate students at UW-Madison do not get their diplomas in Slavic unless they have passed tests at the advanced level in all 4 skills and the grammar test that we take too. So our flagship standards for undergraduates are the same as our standards for those getting a PhD. So they can work together productively too. Cooperation is vital. So we work very closely with these units I've already discussed. We engage community members as much as we can. As I've said, they're not always at the conversations. We sort of balance who's speaking, who might be coming, and so forth to make sure that we can balance having the community involved with making our students comfortable, but we want to engage the community as much as possible in both directions. And cooperation with peer flagship institutions helps us all. We do it in various ways. Excuse me, there we are. Teamwork is vital. So here's our team. We work intimately with the Language Institute, and Diana Murphy, and the Associate Director of the Language Institute, has a PhD in Slavic linguistics. She is fluent in Russian. And she's the associate director who does most of the administrative functions for the program. So she's the outreach person for the bursar's office, for IAP, the study abroad office. She is the primary force behind the grant writing. She's a brilliant grant writer. And so we could not do this without cooperation with, without our constant teamwork with Diana. Anna Tumarkina is the director of our Russian language program. She oversees the tutors. She oversees the TAs. She oversees the testing program. So she too is a vital member of this team. Laura Weigel is our full-time coordinator. She is she's our undergraduate alumna and a master's in Stanford's equivalent of CRECA, their center. So, and her work is absolutely vital to our mission. And then we have an SLA graduate student. So right now we're lucky to have 2 because we have 1 and then another in training. And as I've said, we work very closely with CRECA, whose associate director is a doctoral alumna from our department. Where do we want to go? We want to do research on Skype tutoring. Some of our tutoring goes on by Skype because some of the terrific grad students we can work with aren't right now in Madison. They're writing their dissertations somewhere else. So we want to start doing research on that. We're very interested what some of the differences are between tutoring in person and tutoring via Skype. We want to do more work on blended learning and online activities. We want to keep working on our assessment instruments. We want to be working on validating them better. We're shifting them over to multiple choice, which has some bumps along the road in themselves. We're working on that. We want to have more workshops for flagship students in their areas of interest and to help prepare them, especially now that we're in Kazakhstan. We have very working agreements. UW has an agreement with Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. We have Central Asian Studies, so we've already have very strong traditions in that area, so we can help get students oriented in that direction as well. But there are endless variety of areas where we could have workshops. We want to give more opportunities for undergraduates to present their research and showcase their work. What can be applied? All sorts of high impact practices can be applied everywhere. A language floor, social activities of all kinds, proficiency-based targets, can-do assessments, undergraduate research and chances for undergraduates to present their work, bringing in alumni, having workshops, fostering undergraduate agency and autonomy through various kinds of peer-to-peer engagement. These are all things that can be done without flagship funding. The tutoring is the really difficult activity without the funding. So to give one example of how it's possible, Portland State has a huge Russian language community, and they actually have people who want to volunteer as tutors. So they have volunteer tutors who come from the community. For example, retired people who want to be speaking in Russian and want someone to talk to. They actually want to be doing this tutoring for free. So one can be doing that. One can think about that. So University of Texas has done some really brilliant work in getting intensive first-year language instruction, using a lot of activities online outside the classroom so that students are talking inside the classroom. Tom Garza is also heading at Texas the Partners for Language in the U.S., which is a national organization that's trying to plus certify institutions that want to set themselves along actual proficiency guidelines or some equivalent set of standards to promote proficiency-based instruction, whether it's flagship or not, preferably not, in fact. So to spread proficiency-based targets and proficiency instruction. Engaging, so engagement of the flagship model. We have learned it's very important to engage faculty in proficiency-based targets and in supporting undergraduate research. We engage alumni, as I've said. As guest speakers in context, we engage study abroad partners in online contact, and including by Skype and language cafes. We engage our graduate students and undergraduate students together in various ways. We engage the community in any various possible ways, as many ways we possibly can, and we engage students to take control of their own learning. So I want to thank the following people who played very strong roles in today's discussion, and here is the end of the bibliography and our website. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.